This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week I'll be chatting with some amazing hikers from across the United States and abroad. Spring has finally arrived in the Pacific Northwest, and soon I'll be hitting the trails to record short-form episodes with hikers I meet along the way. Look out for those episodes to drop sometime in June for Season 3. In the meantime, we'll be asking some of your favorite hikers about their experiences and adventures. We always finish the episode off with a round of this or that questions all related to hiking. We have an exciting guest on the Season 2 finale episode. His name is John Mark, also known as Jungle Mark on Instagram, and you can follow him at Jungle Mark Adventure. I had such a great time talking with John Mark on this episode. We learn about the hiking scene in Tennessee in the Southeast, his amazing experiences traveling across Ecuador, and his joy for rock climbing. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, John Mark. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm really excited to speak with our guest today, Mark. He's going to be sharing about his adventures both domestically here in the United States as well as down in South America. Thank you, Mark, for joining us on today's podcast. You know, we always like to start off with our guests and hearing about how they got started hiking and how long they've been hiking for.
Well, my dad would be the person to blame for that. My dad always loved hiking, and the stories they tell, apparently, when I was a baby, when I was crying and wouldn't stop crying, if you took me outside where I could see the trees, I would calm down. I think that's still true for me today. My earliest memories with my dad are me riding on his shoulders as he hiked or trying to keep up with him as he hiked. And so really it's kind of been a lifelong love of just being out, spending time in nature.
I think from your feed, Mark, I gathered that your home base is in the Southeast. I've never had a real chance to visit or at least hike the Southeast. I've been to Atlanta, but didn't do any hiking there. How is it hiking in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so I'm based in Jackson, which is West Tennessee, which is pretty flat. I used to live in Louisiana, which is even more flat. So you don't get those grand views where you like get on, you're on an overlook, or we don't really have, I think the nearest waterfall is like 3 hours away. So we have locally, it's, hilly, some ups and downs, not the big dramatic things people think of like you'd see on the cover of a hiking magazine, but just very pleasant, beautiful woods, lots of wildlife. It's unusual for me to hike and not see deer or a raccoon or something out there. And this time of year is great. It's spring, so we got almost every week a different plants in blossom. Not your grand, dramatic mountains, but just very pleasant, beautiful wooded hills. Now, it is very humid here. We're in the Southeast, so a lot of people struggle with the humidity. It doesn't get to me as long as I stay hydrated. I'm usually fine, but there are times that I'm out there hiking that I think most people think I'm crazy and they'd rather just be inside in the AC.
Yeah, that humidity is something else down in the South. The few times that I visited Atlanta, it almost hits you like a physical wall when you step out of the building.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
How is the wildflower season there in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so I would say it starts late February, early March. Daffodils start popping up, and then you've got dogwoods, And then right now, irises are full bloom. And so we had all the pears and that sort of thing. Of course, a lot of the pears that bloom around here are the invasive, can't remember the name of the species right now, Bartlett pears. That's what they're called. Bartlett pears are blooming a lot. And they're kind of an invasive species, and their pollen stinks, and they also are very weak. So they end up snapping in storms. So not that great, but they are very beautiful in springtime.
I didn't know that Bartletts were an invasive species for you guys. They're one of my favorite pears, at least here in the Pacific Northwest. Somebody brought it over, planted, and it's just kind of overgrown, right?
That's my understanding.
You know, one of the things that I really enjoy that you capture well in your photography and on your feed, I don't see it as often here in the Pacific Northwest, but you captured some really great misty, moody pictures on the trail. When is that season? Is that typically early spring when it's still cool, or is it more towards fall?
Some of each. I think the pictures, if it's the picture I'm thinking of, I posted about a week ago, maybe. There were like some rocks. Yeah. That was in Alabama. That was in March. That was a year ago, but it was in March. So yeah, early spring, kind of as winter is burning off. But really, we can get mist in the Southeast almost any time of year. And that ties in with the high humidity we have. If the weather's been rainy, we can have mist. A lot of times, even in the summer, in the morning before the sun burns it off, there'll be kind of a mist. Maybe not that thick like in that picture, but there'll be kind of a mist here.
And you mentioned Alabama, which the more I see on Instagram, it's kind of a hidden gem when it comes to hiking, because there's a bunch of waterfalls. The state forests there are really nice. You've had an opportunity to travel and hike both domestically and internationally. What are some of your more memorable hiking destinations here in the U.S.?
Here in the U.S., I really love, not this is Tennessee, but Cumberland Trail in Tennessee, I think is probably an underrated gem. It's a bit west of the Appalachian Trail, which is the one that gets all the attention. And of course, that goes all the way from Georgia to Maine, and that's pretty dramatic. Whereas the Cumberland Trail just goes from the Tennessee border with Alabama and Georgia to the Tennessee border with, I think, North Carolina and Kentucky. So it's not that much of a dramatic long trail, but it's beautiful, great backpacking. And actually, I really like that it's a beautiful, fairly well-maintained trail, but I rarely see many other hikers when I've been out there. So I kind of enjoy having that space to myself. So that's been one of my favorite places that I've gone back to a couple times and hiked sections of that. That's probably my favorite hike here in the U.S. that I've gone and done.
You know, one of the state parks that you posted about that captured my attention is Natchez Trace State Park.
Yeah, Natchez. And yeah.
How do you pronounce it? Natchez. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
You got to get that drawl on it, I guess.
Well, the reason it caught my attention, Mark, is not too far from where I live, there's a town that was originally Natchez, but throughout history has now evolved to Natchez. And the original spelling was the same, but now it's Naches. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about that state park and maybe some highlights from it.
I'm not mistaken, somebody who's listening is going to tell me I'm wrong and will give us the accurate information. I trust that they'll do that. And no offense taken, I'd rather be corrected than stay wrong. But I believe the Natchez were a Native American people in the Southeast. And the Natchez Trace was a network of trails, almost like a highway for them, basically. In fact, there's a Natchez Trace Parkway nowadays that more or less follows that route. And it goes from Natchez, Mississippi, which is right on the Mississippi River on the border between Mississippi and Louisiana, through Tennessee. I don't know how far it goes up past Tennessee, but Natchez Trace State Park is kind of a section of that here in Tennessee. And it's one of my go-to state parks. There are two state parks that are both just under an hour's drive from my house that have wonderful trails, backpacking sites that you hike into that are just close enough that I can get off work during the summer and park my car and get to the campsite before dark. And so that's really great. On a Friday afternoon, I can go and make it there and enjoy my weekend without having battled traffic or spent, because if I'm trying to go 3 or 4 hours away and I leave after work on Friday, it's after dark when I get to the trailhead, and that's just an aggravation to try and bushwhack in the dark. There's a Natchez Trace State Park, and it's up against and interwoven with a Natchez Trace State Forest. There's a couple of really fun. I think if you combine the trails on the north side and the south side and the loop them together. It's, I think, over 50 miles. It might be close to 60
Wow.
miles. And I have not done all of those. At some point, I will. Usually, I hike a small section and then find a place that's beautiful and just kind of hang out there. A lot of times, I'm not trying to put down all the miles. I'm just trying to kind of spend as much time as I can in nature and soak it in.
Yeah, the state park looks amazing, and that's remarkable that it has that many trail systems that you can
I
explore.
can't say enough good things about Tennessee state parks. I would argue that Tennessee may have the best system of state parks in the country.
You know, the other thing that's really great on your feed, Mark, is your international travels. And you've been to some amazing destinations, but you've done some memorable hikes internationally. Can you share a little bit about some of the more memorable ones in
Yeah.
recent history?
So most of the ones you'll find on my Instagram would be the ones from the past few years, which would all be in Ecuador. I have traveled and hiked in Honduras, Costa Rica, and Mexico, but I was much younger then and I was not into photography. And a lot of those were before I even had social media. So Ecuador is where you'll see my international pictures for the most part. I actually grew up in Ecuador. I lived in Ecuador from the age of 11 until I was 18. And so in a lot of ways, Ecuador is very much home for me. And so I end up going back as often as I can manage to get enough time off and enough money to pay for the cost of traveling there. But Ecuador is also just an amazing place to hike and have adventures. Ecuador, the country of Ecuador is about the size of the U.S. state of Nevada, just to kind of give a reference point. And it's on the western edge of South America. So you've got the Pacific coast, which is, tropical at sea level, hot. And then you got the Andes Mountains that kind of drop down the country from north to south. And so if you start on the coast, you go up and the Central Highlands, which is where the capital city is, and a good bit of the population lives kind of in these valleys between the high Andes. The towns up there in the highlands are usually around 9,000 feet in altitude. So you've gone, 9,000 feet up to where most people live. And then you've got mountains towering above that, another, up to I think about 18,000 feet, 20,000 feet. So a lot of these towns up in the highlands, you're already, 2 miles above sea level, and there are mountains towering above you. You're on the equator, and there's a snow-capped volcano right there in front of you. And so that's just a beautiful place. Like one of my favorite hikes that I did, this was back, I was in college. Somewhere I have pictures of this. I should go back, find these pictures and repost them. But me and a couple of friends hiked a section of what's called the Inca Trail. And I think most of that hiking, we were probably at about 12 or 13,000 feet,
Wow.
maybe higher. We were above the tree line. There weren't any trees. And we got dropped off at a trailhead and we hiked, found a place to pitch tents, stayed the night, and then kept hiking. And we hiked into the destination. There's a place called Inga Pirca, which are Inca ruins. That was our destination. We made it there on day 2 and then took buses back home. But that was just beautiful. You're high, you're above the clouds, and on the high, you get up to 13, 14, 15,000 feet. There's no trees. It's just this grass, kind of like pampas grass growing everywhere. And that's all it is. And you see there's a bird flying above. There's I think there's some kind of species of blueberry. They taste like blueberries. There's wild berries that grow up there. And it's just a very barren, rugged, beautiful place to hike. On the other side of the mountains, you've got the Amazon rainforest, which is its own, amazing place to hike. As the mountains come down out of the Andes into that Amazon basin, of course, all that water coming down, you've got, probably millions of waterfalls, if not, hundreds of millions of waterfalls. And then you get into the lush, up high in the mountains, it's very gray, brown, sandy colors. As you drop in altitude, it gets lusher and richer greens. And it's just such a beautiful contrast to, and in one day you can go from one to the other. That's just the beautiful thing about Ecuador is, whatever climate or type of picture you want, it's probably just a couple hours.
And, that's one thing that I wanted to ask you is I don't know of any other country or region where you can have both a lush jungle and high elevation mountains in that same place. I know Chile has a little bit, but
Colombia and Peru also are fairly similar climate-wise to Ecuador. They're kind of right there on that Andes ridge. I don't have direct knowledge. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm thinking Kilimanjaro in Kenya. They have that. And then if you go over to northern India, like around Nepal, you might also have some similar contrast, like with the Himalayas and the lowlands there. I don't know if there is that sudden change or if it's more gradual there. I don't know off the top of my head. But those are the two other places in the world where I would imagine you might have a similar set of contrasts.
And you mentioned the elevation change. Is there a bit of a acclimatization when going from either the rainforest to the Andes or vice versa?
Yeah, more so going to high altitude. Going to low altitude is no problem because I mean, what you're dealing with is that the air is less dense, and so there's less oxygen. Each time you fill up your lungs, there's not as much oxygen. So if you're going from a high altitude to a low altitude, you're getting more oxygen, and your body's like, "Oh, this is wonderful, great." But if you're used to a low altitude and you go to a high altitude, all of a sudden, you're out of breath, just going up a flight of stairs, you find yourself panting. So there is, I'd say it takes a couple days to get to where it's not like hitting you hard, but even like after a week or two, you don't have the same endurance you would have at whatever altitude you're used to. In fact, a lot of athletes will intentionally train at high altitudes so that that's their default. And then it makes it easier for them when they're competing at what hopefully would be a lower altitude.
And Mark, I don't know if it's still true, but, I had a friend that would visit Ecuador on a regular basis. And the one thing that I was surprised, and I don't know if it's still the same, but they would use U.S. currency as their currency, right?
That's correct. That started in 2001. So this isn't an economics or political science podcast, but just a bit of background. Ecuador had really, really bad inflation, like double-digit inflation. And no, this was 2000, not 2001. I'm sorry. But in fall of 1999, it was about 10,000 sucres to a dollar in about like August or September. By Christmas, so by December, that's just 4 months, it was 25,000 to a dollar. So
oh my gosh,
the sucre was worth less than half of what it had been worth 4 months before. So that that wreaks havoc on your bank savings, prices trying to do trade. And so in reaction to that inflation situation, at the same time a bank collapsed, the president announced that they were going to switch to the US dollar, which at the time was very controversial. In fact, the president was forced out of office over that. But Ecuador did switch to the US dollar, and it is still somewhat controversial. I mean, there's a bit of national pride in having your own currency. There's less control, like the government doesn't have the ability to print more currency, and they have less control over their economy. Overall, I think it has been a stabilizing factor. Although the US dollar isn't completely stable or perfect, it has, I think, opened up a lot of trade, opened up a lot of tourism, made it easier on that thing. And I think it's been good for Ecuadorians who don't have to worry that their savings are going to half in value when the economy hits a tailspin.
For hikers, Mark, that want to visit Ecuador for the first time and do some hiking, do you have any tips or advice for first-time visitors?
Learn some Spanish. It doesn't have to be perfect, but get to know Spanish so you can greet someone. In Ecuadorian culture, greeting people is very important. Shaking everybody's hand every time you arrive at a place and when you leave a place. And just get enough to introduce yourself, get someone's name. If you have to get someone to help after that, but just the fact that you're trying is going to mean a lot, that you're trying to connect with people. Ecuadorians are very gracious, very welcoming. They're very happy to show off their beautiful country. Ecuador has, if you're in a high mountain, like alpinism, andinism, there's a word like that, andinismo in Spanish, like ice climbing, there's that. There's hiking, there's rafting. So a lot of it's just a matter of asking around and finding what opportunities there are. But whatever you want to do, you could have something as relaxing as you're just chilling at a resort watching hummingbirds. If that's your speed, Ecuador's got that. And of course, there are, class 5 rapids and rock climbing and adventure as intense as you might want to go. My advice is be friendly, get to know people, and see what doors open up.
Oh, solid advice. And I'm glad you mentioned rock climbing, because that's something that's also becoming popular on your feed. And it's something that's interested me because some of the hiking locations I've been to this winter in the Pacific Northwest have been a climber's paradise. Can you share a little bit about how you got started rock climbing and what's your experience been over the years?
Well, the first thing people need to know about me as a rock climber is that I have always been terrified of heights. And people laugh and they don't believe me when I say that, but it's true. As a child, even going up, I remember I was, probably 5, 6 with my dad, and we climbed up a fire tower, which we don't know. A fire tower is a really tall tower in a wooded area that, especially back before we had as much satellite imagery, you'd have someone sitting up there watching during the dry season so that if a forest fire started, there would be an early alert. And so we were climbing up the ladder to that, and I just panicked and freaked out. My dad had to carry me down. And I've always been as a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts, and I was probably, I don't know, 13 or so, 14. And we were supposed to go rappelling. And I got to the top. I looked over and I looked at the rope and the harness, and I said, nope. And I walked back out. So they're just laying that foundation. I have always been terrified of heights, and I don't think I've lost that fear. I think I have learned to manage it a bit. When I was, I guess, 22, the year I finished college. I finished college and didn't quite have a job lined up yet. And I knew some people who worked at a summer camp, and they said, hey, we need someone to run our ropes course program. And I said, I'm willing to give it a shot. And I got shipped off to a week-long intensive training. And there was another person who was supposed to run the climbing tower. And after the first week, that due to some personal reasons, the climbing guy wasn't able to stay the whole summer. And since climbing and ropes both use harnesses and ropes and similar safety systems, I kind of got both programs under me. And I spent that summer learning to trust a harness, learning, I learned a lot of these things in the training. And then over the summer, it really fleshed out, teaching kids how to rock climb, the strength of the harness, how the ropes work, how to keep people safe when you're working in high places off of precipices. I wouldn't say I got over my fear, because it's there, but I learned the tools to keep myself safe despite the fear. And I still say I don't want to rock climb with somebody who's not scared of heights. People who aren't scared of heights scare me, because they're going to go and they're going to jump around the edge of a cliff, and they're going to do something dumb and put us both in danger. Whereas someone who has a bit of fear of heights, they're going to double check the knot. They're going to make sure that the carabiner is locked. And if I'm getting sloppy, they're going to catch me. And that's just how safety works, is you need everybody's eyes on everything. I'm just a lot more comfortable climbing with somebody who's cautious. So that was a while ago. I started working at summer camp. Of course, this was in Louisiana, and there's no rock climbing in Louisiana. It was a artificial flat tower. But through that summer, I grew to really love both ropes course world of team building and rock climbing. And I got looped in with some other people. And a couple of years later, I went with them on a trip to Alabama, where we rock climbed. And I did that a few times. And since moving to Tennessee, I'm a lot closer. And so once or twice a year, I try to make it out to these places with natural rock. I'm still not always as confident lead climbing. I need to work on my lead climbing skills. So I always like to have someone who knows more than me along on the trip. But I've met up often with friends from Louisiana. We've kind of stayed in touch, and we'll meet up either in Alabama or Arkansas and have a grand weekend climbing on the cliffs.
Yeah, that's one thing that I admire and respect about climbers is you have to have not necessarily just faith, but you have to trust your partner in that situation. And it's a lot of trust.
Trust, I think, is the key word. And, you're putting your life in someone's hands. And so you end up becoming very close to these people because you're keeping each other alive. I would say probably some of my closest friends are the people that I've climbed with, because it just kind of creates a bond there.
And I don't know if you've seen this over the last decade, but I feel like after Alex Honnold released the free solo, that kind of exploded rock climbing.
Oh, absolutely. There's a growing interest. And there are several new climbing gyms that have opened in Tennessee over the past few years. And I think it is due to free solo and just some other, it's in the Olympics now. So there's a number of things they're kind of putting climbing on people's radar. And so that's definitely a growing sport right now.
And Mark, would you recommend if somebody's interested in getting into rock climbing that they start off at a rock climbing gym to just get the basics down?
Probably. If you live where there is a really great natural wall, like right in your backyard, why not? I don't think there is an advantage in starting in the gym over rock as far as in learning how to climb. I think gyms just end up being more convenient. But what I would do is say, go to a climbing gym, make some friends. The climbing community is, as far as I've experienced it, and I'm sure somebody's going to have had a different experience than this, but in my experience, climbers are very laid back. They're very, very welcoming, a very chill crowd. Now, again, they're not always laid back about safety, but there's the difference between paying attention to what's going to keep me from going splat and being uptight about things that really don't matter. Maybe that's what's worked there. We deal with the possibility of falling to our deaths. And so, you don't sweat the small stuff when you've dealt with the big stuff. But for example, here in Jackson, we don't really have a climbing gym. We have a gym that has a climbing wall that is open some of the time. And yet we have a solid group of climbers who we've kind of gotten busy and gotten away from this. But for a while, almost every week after climbing on Thursdays, we would go get dinner together. That was an ongoing kind of tradition. And hopefully that kicks back up over the summer. Over the winter, then people had jobs change and just we kind of slacked off. I think it's coming back. But like we would climb together, but then we would end up just hanging out together. And so if you want to go climb, go find some climbers and hang out with them. And I think you'll find that it's a welcoming community. And a lot of sports, it's really awkward or weird to participate with people who are at a very different skill level. Especially I'm thinking like team sports like basketball or soccer. If you're a way lower skill level than everybody else on the field, then you're going to be dragging them down. And vice versa. If you're like miles ahead of everybody on the field, you're going to feel bored. But climbing, when you climb, you're taking turns. And so I can hold the rope and keep you safe while you do a really challenging route. And then we can trade spots and I can do a route that's at my speed and you keep me safe. And so I think it's a lot easier to work with people who are not exactly at your skill level and for people who are fairly advanced to bring on newcomers without feeling like they're being completely pulled down and slowed down. So I think climbing lends itself well to that.
Yeah, it's definitely been something that's been interesting to me because one of my popular hiking routes is also a popular hiking or climbing route.
Do you know anybody who climbs?
I know a few people, and we just got a rock climbing gym maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And it's definitely something that I've been interested in. I've done rappelling, but I haven't done any actual like climbing, but I definitely am interested in getting involved with that community. Switching gears, one of the things you capture so well, not just vegetation, but flowers. And you've posted some really beautiful flowers on your feed. And the one that caught my attention and that I've seen in Hawaii, but I didn't know there was places in the United States that had them wild, but you captured a passion flower in the Ozarks. How did you spot it? And do you know if they're native to that region?
That was, I think it was over Labor Day. So I was with my friend. We'd gone to Arkansas for a weekend of rock climbing, and we were on the way back, and we pulled over on the side of the road just where there was kind of an overlook, kind of get some scenic shots of the mountains. And while we're doing that, I looked down, and there was this vine growing with passion flowers. I snapped that picture. I was pretty happy with how it came out. I believe the passion flower actually is native to the area. I'm actually looking that up because I think I've heard something about that. Yeah, it grows wild in the southern U.S.
Wow.
And
okay.
It's called a maypop is the name. Locally, it's called, that refers to the fruit. When I found it, it didn't have many fruits. I've never found them in the wild with fruits in North America. So I don't know. It's Tennessee's state wildflower, in fact. But I mean, I love passion fruit, and I'd love it if I could grow some. I haven't managed to do that yet. And I don't know if the variety that grows wild here is as flavorful as the fruit that I've had elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it really is. It's a stunning flower. Just the different stripes and the layers of color. It's just a vivid flower.
And I don't know the structure of the flower, but not the petals, but the inside of the petals are kind of intertwined and woven.
We have to ask a botanist to help us out with this. But it's the parts that have the pollen is what it is, I think. Yeah, there's kind of this like little twisted bit in the middle that I think what's called passion flower partly is because people thought those looked like nails. And then the petals kind of in a circle around reminded them of a crown of thorns. And so I think the thought was it reminded them of the crucifixion story. Hence the name passion flower, I think. Again, that's one of those things I'm going to throw out there, and we're going to have a real expert listen to this and set it on the right track. And if you're listening, you're that expert, please let us know so we can know better.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that too, because that kind of makes more sense, especially looking at the flower itself and the story. Yeah. We have a segment on this podcast where we do a deep dive into our guest Instagram feed. And the one picture that caught my attention, well, several pictures, is from different viewpoints and summits where you're rocking a light colored loincloth. Especially in the South with the humidity, and even in the Pacific Northwest, it's always hard to figure out, am I going to wear shorts on this hike? Am I going to wear pants? How is it hiking in a loincloth, and how did it kind of come to be?
Yeah, so it's actually a kilt. It's a hiking kilt. I started wearing kilts off and on probably the year after I finished college or so. And of course, your traditional Scottish kilt is wool and fairly warm, but there are also hiking kilts. And that's what that is. I got it from a company called UT Kilts is where I got mine from. It's really great for hiking. You get a full range of motion better than you get with pants or even shorts. Your traditional kilts don't have pockets. Hiking kilts have pockets, and that's great. I love pockets. I always have a million, pocket knife, keys, whatever in my pockets. And here in the Southeast with the humidity, it is just great to have a little bit more airflow. It dries pretty quickly. I'm not sure what material it's made of. I have to look, but it's some kind of one of those fabrics that doesn't retain moisture too much. And so I started wearing that for hiking a few years back, and it's really great. Sometimes I get funny looks, and a lot of times also get compliments. People are like, hey, my grandfather was Scottish. I should wear a kilt too. And I'm like, well, go for it. Why don't you?
No, yeah. And the fact that it has pockets makes it clutch when it comes to hiking.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the thing with shorts is you're limited on pockets.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very freeing because, at least for me, there's been moments where my hiking shorts or my hiking pants, especially if I'm scrambling and having to do awkward climbing, where my shorts will bust. And that's the last thing you want on the trail.
Right. No, that's one nice thing about a kilt. You get a nice range of motion. It's pretty free. And also, again, with the humidity, it's really great.
Any cautionary tales with the kilt that people should know?
Be aware if you're going up a ladder, if there's anyone below you. Also, yeah. This is true with shorts and even with pants. Anytime you're hiking in the Southeast, we've got poison ivy, so keep an eye out for that. Ticks. I hate ticks. Chiggers. And I always forget to put on bug spray until it's too late and the chiggers have already settled in. I think a kilt is nice for ticks because I feel like I catch them quicker. I think when I'm wearing, I've known people who they'll wear long pants and tuck their pants into their socks and take that approach to getting rid of the ticks. And I see why they do that. But I find that when I'm wearing shorts or my kilt, I feel the ticks on my leg before they latch on. I feel like a tickle or something as it's climbing up, and I get rid of it before it's latched on, as opposed to when I'm wearing pants, I find them at the end of the day and they're already kind of burrowed in and latched on. So I find that I catch them sooner. Of course, you still want bug spray. Watch out for poison ivy. That, just standard nature situational awareness applies.
Gotcha. I'll definitely look into UT kilts and link it on the episode notes because, your pack has enough weight. And if you can store some easy access items on the kilt,
absolutely.
That makes it clutch.
Water bottle, phone. It's nice to have a map right there.
And this next question, Mark, I don't know if you have a regular routine, but some of the hikers that I speak to, when they reach a summit or maybe when they make it back out, they'll have a celebration or a regular routine that they do. Maybe it's a favorite snack or drink. Maybe just a moment of zen. Is there a regular custom that you do when you reach your summit or maybe when you make it back out?
I don't know that I always do this, but I love tea. I love a hot cup of tea. It can be 100 degrees outside, and I will make myself a hot cup of Earl Grey or English breakfast or what have you. And so I don't always do it. In fact, I recently was in Asheville, and I was there for a conference. But I went there with a good friend of mine, and we did some hiking in between the conference activities. I had everything except the kettle. I had my stove, I had water, I had tea, and the kettle somehow did not make it in my bag when I packed for that trip. And I came home and it was sitting there on my desk. And so I don't always do that, but I do often, whether the summit or just, halfway through the trail, I'll make myself a cup of tea. And that's kind of, I guess, my fuel as I hike.
And you said it's either Earl Grey or English breakfast?
I drink all kinds of tea. Those are just two examples. I do prefer black tea, but I'll drink yerba mate. I'll drink herbal tea, especially if it's later in the evening and I want to sleep, something like chamomile or mint. I probably, if I were to go to my kitchen and look, I probably have 50 different kinds of tea on the shelf there, if not more.
Now, Mark, when it comes to your pack list, what's been something that you've considered to be your most valuable piece of hiking gear?
Probably my little kettle. That kettle plus a pocket rocket. If I have that, I can deal with almost anything else. I think hot. Some people are really into cold soaking. That's a thing. But to me, having hot food is just such a mood improver. So even for lunch, a lot of times instead of packing a sandwich, I'll bring ramen or something like that and have hot food. It feels more real. It feels more nourishing. I know scientifically there's probably nothing to that. It's completely psychological, but it perks me up better. I usually do bring my camera with me. So those are probably the two things that come on every trip would be my camera and my little kettle pocket rocket combo.
For somebody that's explored a wide range of the Southeast and both, internationally, some of the locations you've been to, I imagine you've had unique experiences where maybe you had an unexpected wildlife encounter, maybe you got a little turned around or lost for a little bit, or maybe Mother Nature caught you by surprise. Have you had any of those type of experience during your hiking adventures?
Yeah. And there have been a couple times that I misjudged how quickly I could make it back up a mountain. And so, had not much water left in my bottle, and my tent with most of my gear is at my campsite that's still on top of the mountain. I'm trying to make it back and it's getting dark. And that's always kind of a stressful moment. I've had that happen a couple of times. Also, this didn't happen to me, but I'll tell this story. This was actually at a campground. I was with the friends rock climbing. I didn't know who they were, but they were in the same campsite that I had interacted with them. And this site, they'd given pretty explicit instructions that because there were goats and ponies and other animals, that food needed to not be left out. Food needed to be intense. They needed to be, and we just kept our food. We didn't even bring our food over by our tents at all. We kept our food by the vehicles, and we ate by the vehicles and then just shut it back in the vehicles whenever we were done. But anyways, it was the night before we left. So the next morning I was getting up and just driving home, and my buddy and I could hear something outside the tent making a lot of noise, and I had to get up to pee anyways. So I got out, and the people we were sharing a campsite with had left all their food out on their table. And they also had like an ice chest. And I got out and showing my headlamp over there. And there were several raccoons who were having a grand old time. And I didn't know those people, and they'd left their stuff out. I thought about waking up. It was like 2 a.m. Thought about waking them up. I was like, well, what are they going to do? So I just went back to bed. And then, sun came up, and again, I was trying to get back home fairly early because I wanted to get home and take care of stuff before work the next day. So crack of dawn, we're getting up, taking down the tent, rolling out, and the campsite's just trashed. And I'm not sure if the critters got into their food or into their trash or into both. And again, I thought about waking them up. I'm like, I don't even know these people. I don't know how they react to being woken up. You know what? They're going to wake up and they can figure it out. So those are probably my two. And the lesson learned, if I can learn from someone else's mistake, that's great. Be careful with your food. Animals will learn that hikers have food and will learn ways of getting it. And then before you know it, they've ruined your dinner and your gear, and now you're up a creek.
We're halfway through the year, Mark, and when this episode comes out, we'll be, in June. Do you have any hiking goals for the rest of 2023 and maybe some hiking goals beyond this year?
My goal is always to get out more. I probably should have a more measurable number on that, but I'm trying to get out more. I am in the middle of a bit of a career shift, so it's interesting. I'm kind of playing it by ear and seeing how my time to go out and have adventures is changing. But one goal I do have is to get my friends here in Jackson who love to rock climb to organize a climbing trip with them. I've met friends from Louisiana in climbing, and I've had 1 or 2 friends from Jackson come, but we haven't really gone from Jackson as a group to go climbing anywhere other than the gym. And so one of my goals is before this year is up to kind of have I don't want to use the word expedition, that sounds a bit grand, but as a group go together and climb on one of these natural cliff faces that's not too far from here.
Nice. And then any upcoming trips planned for Ecuador?
Not that are scheduled, which pains me to say. I was there last September, like last week of September, first week of October. For the past 10 years, I've worked as a teacher, and I've enjoyed being able to use the breaks between semesters as time to travel and have adventures. That season of my life is over. I'm now working as an interpreter, which I really love. I'm doing both medical and legal interpreting. I'm a freelancer, so the dynamics are a little bit different on taking time off and traveling. And so I'm taking some time to get used to this new rhythm of work before I plan any international trips. But I definitely have several kind of long weekend trips, both like nature adventure trips and also, for example, going to New York in July. I do have some adventures planned, and as soon as I get a good handle on kind of the rhythm of interpreting work, I'll be planning a trip to Ecuador.
Now, that was it for the regular questions. Mark, this next section of the podcast is the this or that questions. We're going to be giving you 2 hiking-related topics, and you kind of just choose the one that you gravitate towards.
Sounds good.
All right. So the first one is, do you prefer ascending or descending?
We go with ascending.
And how about waterfalls or summits?
Oh, it's a close call. Might go with waterfalls, but it's close.
And switchbacks or straight up?
Definitely switchbacks.
Do you prefer trek poles or freehand?
Freehand, I've never used trek poles. I'm actually kind of curious to try them at some point, but I've never broken down and gotten any.
And do you fuel up before a hike or do you fill up after?
I'll fill up after a hike, definitely.
And how about, do you bushwhack or go around?
I love bushwhacking.
And when you come across a body of water, do you jump in or do you stay dry?
I usually try to stay dry. I hate trying to hike with wet socks.
And when it comes to sunsets or sunrises, which one do you prefer?
Probably a sunset, but if I manage to get up, I do love a good sunrise. I just usually stay up too late the night before.
This one might be hard because I think your neck of the woods has the best of both of these, but spring flowers or fall colors?
Oh, spring flowers, of course. I do not like the cold. I hate winter. And fall colors mean that it's getting colder and winter is coming. And I hate that. Whereas spring flowers mean that it's getting warmer and the days are getting longer and summer is coming. And so I will take spring flowers every day.
And then the last one, Mark, is do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
That's a bit of an ethical dilemma. I often will not tag or I'll do a general tag. And it depends. Again, if it's a very well-known site, I probably will go ahead and tag it. But if it's not, if it's a trail I usually have all to myself, I don't want to invite the whole world to my private trail. And, I don't want them coming, not that our listeners would do this, but some people would go to random trails and drop trash. But also I think geotagging, I love my Tennessee state parks and they get revenue based on number of visitors. So if I tag the state park they have my adventure in, that helps them bring visitors, which helps them have funding to have a park ranger on staff, to maintain the trails, to put in improvements. So I think there is, such a thing as responsible tagging and tagging that actually helps places that are managed be managed better.
I like that. Yeah, the more people I talk to, that seems to be the direction people are going, is if it's a well-known and it's an established state park or national forest, they'll tag it. But if it's something remote, they'll tend to just do a general tag. Mm-hmm. Now, Mark, if folks want to follow you on social media and see some of your photography, what are some of the places that they can follow you on?
The best place to follow me would be my Instagram, which is Jungle Mark Adventure. That is the best place. I do have a Facebook page that I post pictures on, and really it's all the same things that go on my Instagram. And it is, I think, also Jungle Mark. Yeah, Jungle Mark Adventure Photographer is what it is on Facebook. Really, Instagram is the main platform I use to share my pictures from my time in nature.
We'll be sure to link those in the episode show notes so people can check those out. And if you get a chance, listeners, check out that passion flower picture because it's truly remarkable.
I may be reposting it now that you mentioned that.
Well, Mark, it's been amazing talking to you and learning about your experience. For the listeners, I'm going to tease a little bit, but Mark and I are potentially working on a second podcast that's going to be a little bit different, or not podcast, but second episode that's going to be a little bit different. And that's going to be out later this year. But thank you again, Mark. It's been awesome talking to you.
My pleasure. This is a great chat. And I'm looking forward to our other episode. I think that's going to be totally awesome.
Thank you once again to John Mark for joining us on the Season 2 finale of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. Be sure to follow him on Instagram at Jungle Mark Adventure to keep up with their latest adventures. We'll be taking a quick break on Monday, June 19th to prep for Season 3, but look out for our teaser trailer to drop on that same day. I'm stoked to be able to share the upcoming guest lineup with you all. In the meantime, please be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on any of those new episodes. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. Catch you on the new season. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth in disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of flip socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.